Hello, my name is Angi, and I am a visual development artist working in the video game industry and also doing visual development for animated feature film. I've currently been working with Gem City Games, and my latest feature work has been in a movie for toy animation from Japan. And I am also a herbalist in training, so very big plant enthusiast. And I would like to welcome you to this first installment of Botany tutorials for artists. We will be looking at very basic botany principles that are gonna help you improve your storytelling, your immersive power as an artist to put people who are looking at the work that you do into those worlds, characters, and environments that you are creating. A lot of people might be wondering why you want to learn basic concepts of botany. I think plants are amazing. They have always been a part of human life ever since we've had a conscious existence on this earth. They have been part of the socioeconomic, the sociocultural, they have been allies of the divine, healers, and even economic boosts at different parts of human history, like the tea in England and China. And I really, really think that there is a lot to be learned from gaining more knowledge from the world around you. And as I say this, I am sort of gazing out my window and looking at this lovely black-eyed Susan vine that I have and my mango tree that's been there since I was a child. And just feeling very happy that I get to study these things, and hopefully I will transfer some of that enthusiasm over to you with this video series. And without further ado, let's learn about botany. Let's begin with this painting I've created for the purpose of this tutorial. What I want to achieve with this example is to show you how knowledge of basic botanic principles, like a little bit of plant ID and all the variety that is at our disposal, can really help make a scene feel alive. How you can use these elements to aid your storytelling, to immerse your viewer in that hot summer day that the character is experiencing in her garden, maybe somebody else's garden. Maybe I feel like this vegetation that I've put here helps me enter into the context of the story. It gives you an idea of where it could be in the world, maybe. It gives you an idea of the character of the person who tends to the garden, because it's more like a hedgerow where you have different medicinal herbs growing together, and you have a lot of wild growth on the back and this kind of unkempt but healthy sunflowers and a little forest on the back. So it is really, really important to be able to know what you're putting into the scene so you can depict it properly. And also, I feel like it's a sort of mindful exercise to put yourself in there and experience with your senses how the scene feels, maybe even what the character is going through. I used to have a really fantastic script writing teacher at university, and he always said, "This is all very great, but what does the character have in his pocket? And you would be wondering, like, well, I don't want to put that in the script, but it's a question that you ask yourself. It's a question that is telling you that you should know more than what you're telling the audience, because you as the creator always need to know more in order to make this world that you're putting out there believable, or to make it mesh temporarily with your viewers' reality. And this is a good moment to mention and just make it very clear that I have a sort of pet peeve towards one of the most common elements in creating environment paintings nowadays, and that is the usage of pre made foliage stamp brushbacks. And I would just like you to hear my explanation of it. I'm not saying that you can never use them. I think these are great to use if you have a previous knowledge of this plant structures, because then even if you're using these brushes, you have the tools to actually alter them and paint on top of them to make them look a lot better without just wondering what it is and ending up with very weird rhythms in your foliage, or very even rhythms in your foliage. Um, so I feel like using this pre-made foliage, like Ghibli type brush packs. Again, I have nothing against the brush pack itself, more like what it represents. um, it's like the equivalent of a microwave meal. So when you have a microwave meal, you will definitely know the outcome by the end. You just peel off the plastic, put it in the microwave, and at the end, you're left with something that's definitely edible, but that's it, right? And it's very, very different to going to the supermarket and or the market and picking fresh ingredients, finding a recipe you like, going home, really washing those vegetables, smell how they smell when you just freshly cut them, and then come up with a wonderful meal that's gonna feel amazing to you and to the people who you share this meal with, because it's made with such care and fantastic ingredients. And you can think of these fresh ingredients as this knowledge from the world around you that you put into your work. And there is nothing to lose from knowing more of the world that you're trying to show people. Plant kingdom and the organisms that inhabit it. Um, so first we have mosses and liverworts, which are non-vascular plants. Then we have ferns, gymnosperms or conifers, and angiosperms or flowering plants. And a really, really cool fact is that 80% of the plants on planet Earth are angiosperms. Now that we've done that really quick review of the members of the plant kingdom, let's look at them a little bit more into how they grow. So we have this very simple classification system, and let's begin with trees. So I am quite sure everybody's very familiar with trees. Um, the description that will be used in this case is a large woody plant having secondary branches which are supported on a main stem or trunk. Pretty self explanatory, right? Then we have shrubs or bushes, which are smaller woody plants with multiple stems. You can think of a bramble bush, a green tea bush. I think rowan is also a bush, if I am not mistaken, a tree or bush. Um, then we have vines, which are herbaceous or woody plants with a climbing or twining stem. And in this case, we have also tendrils sometimes, which are additional structures that the plant creates to adapt and support that trunk when it is not strong enough by latching on to different structures around it. And tropical forests are a biome which is perfect for finding vines because plants in this environment need to find sunlight and also to escape the predators that are closer to the forest ground. So you will see lots of very nice climbing plants if you ever visit or live in a country where you have tropical forests. And I have some really, really cool tropical forest facts for the next video though, so stay tuned. Then we have grasses, which are herbaceous plants with slender leaves or blades and inconspicuous flowers. And finally, we have aquatic plants, which are herbaceous plants that grow partly or fully in the water. So the plant doesn't have to be completely in the water body to be considered as an aquatic plant, rather than it takes its sustenance from a larger proportion of water than land, or an equal proportion. Some examples of what I just explained. We have a tree. This is a spruce tree. A green tea bush. Green tea is a bush. And all of the varieties of tea that you have is oolong, green, white. It all comes from the same plant. It just varies in degrees of fermentation, which I think it's pretty cool. Also, matcha comes from this plant. This is a bramble bush. You can see the woody stems. This is Borago officinalis, and it will be a 4 broad leaves, showy flowers. I really, really like the flower in this plant. It's also called starflower. And then we have some vines. This is a decorative vine called teacup and saucer vine. And then we also have a passion flower or passion fruit plant. And you can see all of the tendrils trying to find structures to support the weight of all of this fruit that the plant is producing. That's a fantastically productive plant, actually. And then we have grasses, and you would think that these fluffy structures that you see on the grasses are just sort of another leaf structure, but because that's not the way we're used to looking at flowers, or more like flowers looking this way, we wouldn't think that is a grass flower. We have a couple of aquatic plants that grow fully on water. At the basic structure of a leaf, and we're gonna do a lot of leaf drawing in this tutorial, so I wanted to address that. We have the stem, and then the stem is divided into nodes and internodes. Usually, leaves and flowering parts come out of those nodes, and the internode is just like the transition between those parts. Um, for a common leaf, let's say it has a common attachment type, we have a petiole, which is this little stem that comes directly out of the node. And then we have the stipules, which are structures that protect the new leaf. So when you see these little things, they're meant to protect that precious new leaf that's coming out. On the leaf blade, as it goes through the middle, the petiole turns into the midrib. And from that midrib, we have veins, the main veins stemming, and then we have small netted veins, which are not as noticeable. So when I am talking about venation types later on, I am talking just in general. I wouldn't think that like the netted veins are very important design wise, unless you're doing like something that's going to be really close up. And then just a quick look at the main leaf. We have margin, base, and apex. And it is important to know about the base of the leaf because different leaves have different shapes, and sometimes when you go in and look into plant ID, they will say this plant has a serrulate edge leaf that has a cordate base, and then you know that this base is the bottom part of the leaf, or it has a cordate apex. It means it's inverted. Okay, now for our last bit of theoretical explanation. This is taken from the graphic that I included for you to download, where you can go back and check if you need to do some plant ID or if you had any doubts about something specific in terms of uh, leaf arrangements and such. So I just want to show you these bits because it shows you how much you have at your disposition to create variety. Um, the leaf shapes, I think it's the most important here regarding what we're looking at, because usually we only use ovate, cordate, and probably lanceolate leaves. So that's only three types of leaf shapes among all of these leaf shapes. So imagine like all the stuff you can do, because this graphics that I'm showing are basically sometimes mix and match. You know, you can have this leaf shape with this leaf edge, and look at all of this gorgeous leaf edges. I think my favorite one is the deeply divided one, because one of my favorite plants, mugwort or Artemisia officinalis, is having this leaf type. And then finally, the very brief venation explanation. These are the main four. You have perivein, palmate, parallel veins, and reticulate veins. And again, you can go back to the graphics and check all of this. Same with the compound leaves. Leaves are not only a single leaf blade, we can also have compound leaves. And we have sort of the same arrangement: pinnate, we have bipinnate, palmate, digitate. So for the sake of not making this explanation very long, I encourage you to go out in an adventure and find these, identify these leaf types by yourself. This is a sessile amplexical leaf. A sessile leaf is one that has no petiole, and all of these examples are sessile leaves, but one of them is sheathed. Uh, the other one, this eucalyptus leaf, is a perfoliate leaf, and then this other leaf is simply a amplexical leaf. Mix them and add that richness and depth to that environment. Then we have this ones, which I like to call the anemone grass, and we're not talking about aquatic life precisely in this video, but this is not how land grass should look like. And then we also have like a little cluster of flowers, and then a very, very simple vine. And I want to explain very quickly how we can improve on this, or just make it more natural looking. When you're drawing tufts of grass, grasses have these long thin leaves, right? We saw it previously. And then grasses also have flowers, but next to this tuft of grass, there should also be some other herbs like a dandelion. The leaves will need to fold over here, over there. Uh, Maybe they're spread throughout, maybe they're bunched up together more in one part or the other, or they're eaten by bugs. And the flower clusters, I think we can do more than just this little circles. We can break up the shapes and at different sizes and pointy ends, rounded ends, to just kind of add that variety that is present in nature. For our vines here, I very commonly see this very simple vine, which consists of a stem, a soft stem, and opposed or alternate leaf structures. And the truth is that we, even in vines, we have a very wide variety of ways of how we could depict it. And the main problem I see in these types of things is the lack of overlapping. And just like this tousled look, um, leaves will grow in different angles and they will overlap each other's, and then from the nodes above the leaves. Maybe there will be blooms coming out. So yeah, we should include this type of overlap, even if we're doing something very simple. You don't have to add all of the details, but as long as you get like the essence of the plant there and it doesn't look like something that's stiffly made, it's easier. And saying that it is your style can be justified, but also I have this feeling. I wanted to show you something about the spacing of the nodes in a plant. And here I've marked the internodes, which we already saw as the space between the nodes from which leaves and flowering structures and fruits, all of this grow from. Well, fruit is before a flowering structure. And the importance of variety also. Look at this painting of Ophelia by John Everett. Part of the storytelling here is the variety that we have. Yes, we know that Ophelia is bathing in a lake, uh, but what gives us the sense of being there besides the water and the storytelling? If we remove all of this lovely variety, it would just look like she was maybe looking at her reflection and she grasped a branch and then fell in the water and now she's probably dying. Uh, I'm told that the model was very cold when this painting was being made. I think that's it. Uh, so if you do this masterful um, alteration of mine, then you will be able to see how much variety matters. Then we have the Carnation Lily Rose by Sargent. Imagine if it was just lily, lily, lily. We wouldn't have this lovely, gorgeous variety in rhythm and shape, and also the variation in the grasses' angles and how the petals curl. All of this is adding this magical, whimsical feeling to the painting, that thing that immerses us there. We have this other very lovely painting, which is the Allegory of Spring by Caesar Philip. And in this painting, we can observe what I mentioned about not needing to actually have very defined shapes to be able to depict variety. He has a bush, he has a tree, he has wildflowers. This painting I really like. It's a world by Maximilian Lentz, and he handles the little uh, clusters of flowers very well because there's not much definition there, but he is aware of how this structure behaves in nature, so he depicts it very effectively without needing to define much. It would look very different if it was just a field of daisies or a field of other wildflowers that don't grow in this manner. And then here for the final little bit of mistakes that I see. And then I will still keep approaching this dialogue about, let's call it, I'm calling it a mistake, but I think a better way of putting it is something that you can improve on. So it's the same apple branch that I showed before, but on the example on the right, I am having a very equidistant um, measurement in between the nodes. So all of the leaves and all of the fruit are coming at very regular intervals. But if you observe a lemon tree branch or an apple tree branch like the one on the photo, you will be able to see that this space between the nodes is actually quite irregular, and sometimes the very last bit of the branch, the tip of the branch, is longer, and you could have like very, very short spaces sometimes in between nodes, and then you have little cramped leaves. And it is this beautifully controlled chaos that creates that sense of naturality. And what we are going to try to include in the plant sketching that we're doing next. Okay, so we're going to begin by explaining how I approach drawing plant structures. In this case, we're talking about the leaf part of the plant mainly, and this is going to be leaves from a squash plant. I am working on an iPad for this tutorial, and I thought it would be handy to see how I keep my reference on the left. Of course, you should accommodate this to your preference, but I find it really useful to do it like this because Procreate, which is the software I'm using here, has a very limited number of layers, and sometimes I just like to keep those three for my sketching, duplicating, or whatever I need to do. So, the first thing that I want to do is I want to approach building the structure on a plane and treating this plane like if it was a folded leaf of paper. And this was not my idea per se. I found many years ago in the art book for How to Train Your Dragon movie, one of the artists was trying to find the shape and design for the craggy peaks on the island where they live. I think it's called Berk. Yeah, something like that. And I thought, well, yeah, this is like an useful way of designing too, just that I'm not crumpling out the paper. I'm just trying to imagine how a paper would fold, and then I'm accommodating that leaf that I am trying to design to this paper. And as you can see, I'm going from very simple to more specific later on. I am not approaching the edge of the leaf right now. I am not approaching any details. I'm just trying to get a feel for how these bend and fold and maybe interact with each other later on. And also, you can see I'm not being super strict about it either. One of the things that I do a lot is that I feel around the shape until I find something that works. Um, when I am drawing and painting, there's a lot of experimentation in between, and I like to find not only things that are effective in general, but I also like to find things that are effective for me and the way that I work. So, in the beginning, this is how I would do it, or if there's something that I really like a bend that I can't really solve, I will go in and try this technique. If you have any doubts, you can also grab a sheet of paper and draw the flat shape of the leaf, and then you can maybe fold it, scrunch it, take some photos, and that could help you understand the structure much better. Okay, so now we're getting into that specific part of making this squash plant leaf what it is. So if you look it up, this is a butternut squash leaf, which is not necessarily that one that's next to it, but this plant is this leaf is a lobed leaf, but it sometimes some people call it palmate leaf. And the truth is that the venation in the plant is palmate venation. And if we go back to that chart that I made earlier, that I showed you earlier, you'll be able to see this. So palmate, it's, you can think of it as the palm of your hand. That's how the points of the leaf, the apexes of the leaf, are structured to angle towards, like if they were the tips of your finger, and so do the veins of the plant. For the second demo, I wanted to show you this plant, which I'm sure lots of you know, but it's very widely used throughout art history because of how picturesque it is. and how well it grows. It just, once this plant takes root and is healthy, it will just grow like crazy. And it's called Tropaelum majus, or commonly known as Nasturtium. It is a member of the watercress family, and like the watercress, it's entirely edible. You can eat the leaves and like wrap them around a little piece of cheese or whatever you like, and the flowers make wonderful salad. And here I am doing the same thing but much more simple than with the squash leaves. I am using this planes to find different orientations of the leaves, and these leaves won't be completely round. They have their imperfections. And something I'm taking into consideration is how the petioles of these leaves grow from the main stem. And Nasturtium, the Strophaelomachus, is a creeping plant as well, so they will grow from the main stem in an alternate manner and then just like spread up to the sides. And the stems can grow really, really long, but also some of these stems sometimes work as tendrils, and if they had to climb onto something, they will just wrap around that piece of wood or another branch of a plant that you can find that it can find. And again, I want to specify that you should go from very simple to complex, because if you're starting to draw a leaf or a whole plant and you're really trying to learn how this rhythm works and how to establish and solve all of these problems before you go into the painting part, it is very important to not try to solve many problems at once. For me, it's easier if I just segment those problems and approach them one by one. And this is something that I learned in oil painting class. I am I learned to help myself in the process for the more complex rendering parts of it. So you can think of this as that same thing where you're having to have a solid base that you can just paint on top of, and then you don't have to go back and solve all of these things. You can go back and tweak and change your mind, but this will definitely speed up your workflow until you are able to just draw these plants from your visual library, and you don't have to do all of the structure. Eventually, it does become second nature. And now I am going to go in and start structuring the blooms from this plant. And what I did here is that I found different orientations for the planes and then found the center of the flower and sort of drew something like the arrows that we have there on top to decide where each of the petals was going to be. And then I am going again from very general to specific by drawing these flowers. And I am roughly looking at my reference on the left, but not exactly copying it. I am trying to understand how the petals are attached to the flower and like how they would kind of undulate depending on how this little flower has grown, where it's orientated. And you can see there that in some of them I didn't even just like drew all of the individual petals, but I am still using a very large general gesture for what I am trying to depict. And now I'm just going to talk a little bit about the morphology of the leaf in this plant. This is an orbicular leaf shape, which means it's completely round. Sometimes it has undulate edges. Just imagine like a ribbon, when you sort of move it up and down, it will make this wavy pattern. That's an undulate edge. Or sometimes they can have lobed edges, which is what I am going to use in this particular plant. And the veins in this plant sprout from the center of the leaf outward, they radiate outward. And in most cases, they're just very noticeable white veins. And I'm just gonna leave you for a second here with a small part of the demo. And as you see this and this part where we begin to be specific, this is where we add a lot of the character to our sketch. And I'm attempting to have a clean sketch here because it will make it a lot easier for me when I go into paint. And in my final rendering of this plant, which is shown in the card that you see before the section, I did change a lot of the leaf orientations and things because sometimes some things have worked in the sketch, but then I decided I want to change them a little bit. I also wanted to mention this reference in this that I have on the left this time. The leaves on this plant um, are sick. I think they're attacked by some sort of bug, and this is why they grow all crinkled. And a healthy leaf should not have these crinkly things or any lumps. That means there's a pest living in it. So a good way of deterring some of those pests could be ladybugs and aromatic herbs like rosemary and tarragon. This next part is a demo of a very, very lovely plant from the mallow family called hollyhocks. And the reason that I wanted to make a little demo with hollyhocks is that this beautiful bushy plant has a very interesting phyllotaxis. And as you can see, the result is very striking. And what I'm doing here, I've done before. I am using the main stem and then I am using that little line to act as a midrib to sort of angle the leaves and fold them. And then because there's several stems of hollyhocks coming from this one place where the plant is planted, I'm using this little arrow diagram so I can plan beforehand how I want the stems to move, so I can find some natural movement into my sketch of the plant. And this is a very, very good time to remember that vine that I explained in the mistakes part, where we only had sort of alternate leaves on a simple stem. And the phyllotaxis on the hollyhocks, which is the arrangement of blooms or leaves around the stem, that's the meaning of phyllotaxis, is very interesting because the leaves are alternate, but they also sort of spiral around that stem. And it's something important to keep in mind that you don't only have leaves growing at opposite side of the stems, rather that they grow from the nodes in certain intervals. And achieving this rhythm is what makes our plant look like a real plant. Doesn't matter the degree of stylization. And then I'm just doing adding the blooms of the hollyhock, and the blooms come from the same node that the leaf stems from. And that's something very important to keep in mind. Blooms, buds, all of these extra parts of the plant are coming also from the leaf nodes. So we've reached the final part of the demo, and here I am again doing the same thing where we have one main stem, and then from it I draw these lines angling outwards, which represent the petiole, and then turn into the midrib. And this allows us to find a very nice and natural rhythm to the leaves of the sunflower plant, as well as trying to find an interesting bloom size variation. I'm just doing a little group of tree here because it doesn't seem like I would need more to actually illustrate a group of these flowers. And if you remember the illustration that I showed at the very beginning of the tutorial, this is the main plant in the storytelling part. Some cool sunflower facts are that they're always facing the sun. And a very, very good thing to do is get yourself some fresh flowers for reference. I went to my local flower shop, which was very luckily a very cheap vendor, and I got myself around 6 sunflowers and observed them for a while and did quite a few sketches. You can get flowers for cheap probably at the farmer's market, but not at a fancy flower shop. They will always overcharge you there. Okay, so here I want to talk a little bit about the petals and what my. So what I did was I drew these petals out from the center of the flower to that circumference I traced. And thanks to the observations I did before, I was able to sort of lump the groups of petals into a way that describes the mass of the flower without either making it too scattered so that it's too noisy visually, or that they're too clumped together and too uniform where it takes out the naturality that I want to bring across with the design of the plant. And we can also talk a little bit about sunflower leaves so we can remember some of those leaf shapes and margins. So sunflower leaves are usually 30 centimeter long leaves that are having a cordate base, and usually they have a serrate edge, or sometimes they have lobed edges. I think sometimes this description varies from whoever's been recording it, but the important thing is that you take uh, this botanical knowledge you have and then you apply it to your observations. And if there's any mistake, you can always go back to ID charts or just really look closely and judge by yourself. It's a very nice creative um, practice that helps you to be mindful of observation. Because how many times do we just walk around and we don't really see what's around us? You're used to your daily walk to work or to the store, even at the doorstep of your own home. And maybe sometimes it's good to step and observe twice or thrice, and then maybe you'll see things that you didn't see before. I wanted to include this very short painting time lapse. And I am not addressing rendering in this video, but in the next video for creation of fantasy plants, or rather fantastical plants. I think that sounds nicer. And this is a very, very simple process for now. I usually just start with a flat wash of color, and then I will add some gradients, a layer of multiply, and then some layers of screen. And usually at this point, I will just keep my reference handy on the side, the sunflower leaf, and some photos that I took at a nursery that I went to with my mom. And then I will usually just flatten the layers into each individual sunflower and paint on top as if it was an oil painting. The cool thing with digital media is that you have the flexibility of cutting and duplicating parts of a layer. So I find that depending on the purpose of the uh, artwork or asset you're creating, you don't really need to have everything on a separate layer. I just like to have it organized that way. My sunflowers at first were very well coiffed and they just felt too neat to me. Even on my sketch, they look nice as a line drawing, but I felt like if I took the petals and then I disheveled them a little bit more, it will really add character to the plant. And I think it really worked. It's nice to treat um, your plants as characters because plants respond to environmental stimuli just like we do. So, thank you so much for sticking with me all the way through here. I want to leave you with my favorite quote from this book by John Fowles, an English novelist. The book is called The Tree. And in this essay form book, he talks and questions how we as a society give so much value to usefulness and usability and productiveness, and how we tend to underappreciate nature because nature is not concerned with such things, it's just concerned with being. And I think this book is filled with beautiful thoughts. So I welcome you to grab a copy or find it online. And thank you so much. I'm really happy to have been able to share these things with you and see you soon.